In April 1994, a UN commander in Rwanda sent an urgent telegram to United Nations headquarters in New York. He had intelligence about weapons being stockpiled for mass killing. He had their exact locations. He asked for permission to raid them before the violence began. The UN told him to stand down. 10 weeks later, 800,000 people were dead. The commander was Canadian General Romeo Dallaire. He would spend the rest of his life haunted by what he had been ordered to watch happen. This is the Rwandan genocide, the fastest mass killing in recorded history, carried out while the United Nations, the United States, and France knew and chose not to stop it. To understand how it happened, you have to go back. Rwanda is a small, landlocked country in Central Africa with two main groups, the Hutu majority and the Tutsi minority. For much of its history, the line between them was fluid, based more on class than identity. That changed under Belgian colonial rule after World War I. The Belgians introduced identity cards labeling every person as Hutu or Tutsi. They elevated Tutsis as a superior race and gave them access to education and positions of power. They turned a flexible social distinction into a rigid ethnic divide and used it to control the population. When Rwanda gained independence in 1962, the Hutu majority took power. The resentment built during colonial rule turned into decades of violence against Tutsis. Massacres happened again and again, forcing many to flee the country. By the early 1990s, extremist groups were preparing something far more systematic. They stockpiled hundreds of thousands of machetes. They created detailed kill lists, naming Tutsi families across the country. They trained militias like the Interahamwe to carry out the killings. They also ran a radio station that called Tutsis cockroaches and openly encouraged their extermination. It did not hide its intent. It normalized it. Western governments knew. Intelligence reports warned that a genocide was being planned. The warnings were specific and repeated. France was supplying and training the Rwandan military. No one intervened. On April 6, 1994, the plane carrying Rwanda's president was shot down over the capital city of Kigali. Within an hour, roadblocks appeared across the city. The killers had their lists. They knew exactly who to target. The genocide began that same night. Over the next 100 days, the killing reached a pace that exceeded even the worst periods of the Holocaust. At its peak, about 8,000 people were murdered every single day. This was not distant or anonymous violence. Neighbors killed neighbors. Co-workers killed co-workers. Teachers killed their own students. Priests and community leaders turned on the people who trusted them most. Hutus who refused to participate were killed alongside the Tutsi. The primary weapon was the machete. Cheap, simple, and already distributed across the country in the months leading up to the genocide. The radio station broadcast names and locations of people in hiding. It gave instructions on how to kill more efficiently. It told listeners where survivors had taken refuge so they could be found and killed. Places that should have been safe became killing sites. In one church in Nyamata, around 2,000 Tutsis seeking safety were killed after militia threw grenades through the windows and then entered with machetes. Similar massacres happened in churches, schools, and hospitals across the country. All the while, General Dallaire and his 300 UN troops were ordered not to intervene. He had the capacity to save lives and disrupt the killings. He was told not to act. The United States government knew within days that genocide was happening. Internal discussions focused not on how to stop it, but on how to describe it. Officials were instructed to avoid using the word genocide, because under international law, using that word would have obligated them to act. So instead, they said acts of genocide may have occurred. France's role went even further. It had supported the Hutu government for years, leading up to the genocide. During the killings, French forces were present, and later investigations found evidence they protected some of the leaders responsible rather than the victims. Years later, France acknowledged it bore heavy responsibility for enabling what happened. By July 1994, a Tutsi rebel force finally took control of the country and ended the genocide. By then, around 800,000 people were dead. Some estimates are even higher. The killing had lasted just 100 days. General Dallaire returned to Canada with severe trauma. He later said that a force of just 5,000 well-equipped troops deployed early could have stopped the genocide almost entirely. Those troops were never sent. Some of the people who planned and carried out the genocide were eventually tried and convicted. Even the radio broadcasters who encouraged the killings were held accountable. But the governments that knew, that were warned, and that chose not to act faced no consequences. Years later, President Clinton stood in Rwanda and admitted the failure. He finally used the word genocide. 4 years too late. 800,000 people too late. The Rwandan genocide did not happen because the world was unaware. It happened because the world knew, understood exactly what was coming, and decided that intervening was not worth the cost. The question it leaves behind is simple. When leaders say never again, what does that actually mean if they keep choosing not to act?